This screencast is the lecture on Paradise Lost, Book 1. Let's look at the beginning of the poem. Of man's first disobedience and the fruit of that forbidden tree, whose mortal taste brought death into the world, and all our woe with loss of Eden, till one greater man restore us, and regain the blissful seat. Sing, heavenly muse, that on the secret top of Oreb or of Sinai didst inspire that shepherd, who first taught the chosen seed, in the beginning how the heavens and the earth rose out of chaos. Or if Sion hill delight thee more, and Siloa's brook that flowed fast by the oracle of God, I thence invoke thy aid to my adventurous song, that with no middle flight intends to soar above the Aeonian mount, while it pursues things unattempted yet in prose or rhyme. And chiefly thou, O Spirit, that dost prefer before all temples the upright heart and pure, instruct me, for thou knowest, thou from the first wast present, and with mighty wings outspread, dove-like satst brooding on the vast abyss, and madest it pregnant. What in me is dark illuminate, what is low raise and support, that to the height of this great argument I may assert eternal providence, and justify the ways of God to men. First of all, did you notice something unusual about these 26 lines? What I find amazing is that they are all one sentence. We don't come to the first period until the end of line 26. It's as though Milton has taken a big deep breath and then just dived right into his story. Let's take a look at some of the things that he includes in these lines. First of all, the poem begins with, of man's first disobedience. Milton begins Paradise Lost then, with Adam and Eve's disobedience to God, the loss of paradise for all humanity. Right off the bat, he's telling us that this poem is going, or what this poem is going to be about: disobedience and the sudden subsequent loss of paradise, not only for humans, but for the fallen angels too. Here in lines 4 and 5, he calls Christ a greater man. He's the one, of course, that restored us after the fall. And so this is making him something of a bridge that spans the gap between the angels' expulsion from heaven and Adam and Eve's expulsion from the Garden of Eden. He, being Milton, is telling two stories at once here. They parallel each other. Remember that one of the features of epic poetry is the invocation of the muse. This is it. Milton is doing the invocation right here in these first 26 lines. And he calls it his heavenly muse in line 6, and says that it has always been around. Any ideas of whom this muse might be then? He's calling upon the Holy Spirit to guide his writing of this text. In other words, he's asking God himself to inspire the writing. And he's asking that he's invoking the muse's aid in his adventurous song. In other words, in writing this poem, he's asking the muse to instruct him, and that to illuminate what's dark inside of him and to raise up what is low. Finally, at the end of the sentence, he tells us his goal in writing this poem. He wants to justify the ways of God to man. In other words, he wants to explain why God does what he does. Does that seem a little pompous to you? I mean, in Dr. Faustus, we learn that man's mind can't comprehend the mind of God. So who does Milton think he is to say that he's going to explain God? I suppose he must be really relying on the muse to tell him everything he needs to know. So it's not long into the poem that we get a description of Satan. Let's back up. Thus Satan, talking to his nearest mate, that being Beelzebub, with head uplift above the wave and eyes that sparkling blazed, his other parts besides prone on the flood, extended long and large, lay floating many a rood in bulk as large as whom the fables name of monstrous size, Titanian or earthborn, that warred on Jove. So Milton's saying that Satan is huge. He's as big as a Titan. Briareos or Typhon, whom the den by ancient Tarsus held, or that sea beast Leviathan, which God of all his works created huges that swim the ocean stream, him happily slumbering on the Norway foam, the pilot of some small night-foundered skiff deeming some island oft as seamen tell, with fixed anchor in his scaly rind, moors by his side under the lee, while night invests the sea, and wished morn delays. I love this comparison of Satan to a leviathan. That's what we would call a whale. There was an old myth that sailors would be searching for land and would mistake a whale for an island. They'd pull up next to it and attach their anchor to the whale, and just when they thought they were safe, the whale would dive down to the bottom of the sea, taking the ship and the ill-fated sailors with it. The whale devil connection was made early on, reminding people that they might not recognize the devil when they encounter him, and because of that will be led to their eternal deaths. In other words, lose their souls. In these lines, we find out that Satan still looks much like he did when he was an angel. The other angels that fell from heaven with him are waking up, and although they are incredibly beautiful themselves, Milton said that Satan is even more magnificent. Thus far these beyond compare of mortal prowess, yet observed their dread commander. He above the rest, in shape and gesture proudly eminent, stood like a tower. His form had yet not lost all her original brightness, nor appeared less than archangel ruined, and the excess of glory obscured, as when the sun new risen looks through the horizontal misty air, shorn of his beams, or from behind the moon in dim eclipse a disastrous twilight spreads, or sheds, on half the nations, and with fear of change perplexes monarchs. Darkened so, yet shone above them all the archangel, but his face deep scars of thunder had entrenched, and care sat on his faded cheek, but under brows of dauntless courage and considerable pride. So he's still beautiful, but his beauty has been dimmed, like the sun going behind clouds or when it's eclipsed by the moon. Although he's incredibly perfect, he's not absolutely the quintessential perfect that he would have been had he been in heaven. So even from the start, he still feels rebellious against God. He vows revenge. What though the field be lost? All is not lost. The unconquerable will and study of revenge, immortal hate, and courage never to submit or yield, and what is else not to be overcome, that glory never shall his wrath or might extort from me, to bow and sue for grace with suppliant knee, and defy his power. Satan doesn't seem to be too remorseful about leading the revolt against God, but he does seem to feel bad about all the angels that he brought down with him. Cruel his eye, but cast signs of remorse and passion to behold the fellows of his crime, the followers rather, far other once beheld in bliss, condemned for ever now to have their lot in pain, millions of spirits for his fault immersed of heaven, and from eternal splendors flung. For his revolt, yet faithful now they stood, their glory withered, as when heaven's fire hath scathed the forest oaks or mountain pines, with singed top their stately growth, though bare, stands on the blasted heath. We learn elsewhere in the poem that a full third of the angels in heaven were damned along with him, that their fall took days and days to complete. So Satan does not regret his revolt, but does seem to regret that he took so many angels down with him. We're not used to a Satan who has remorse or compassion. Certainly he might just have these emotions because he's still not completely changed from his angelic state. But I find it incredibly interesting to encounter a portrayal of Satan in anything other than a negative light. In fact, I suspect that Milton is casting Satan and his angels in something of a comitatus relationship. They stayed true to their Lord, even unto eternal damnation, and are suffering that worst of fates that any of them could imagine, which would be eternal exile. So, In fact, as he prepares to address his fallen comrades, Satan is overcome with emotion. He now prepared to speak, whereat their doubled ranks they bend from wing to wing and half enclose him round with all his peers. Attention held them mute. Thrice he essayed, in other words, 3 times he went to speak, and thrice, in spite of scorn, tears such as angels weep burst forth. So each time he tried to speak, he dissolved into tears. At last, words interwove with sighs found out their way. So eventually, he's able to speak. But Satan is crying at the loss that all of his companions suffered because of his attempt against God. So he tries to rationalize their expulsion from heaven, saying the mind is its own place and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. What matter where, if I be still the same, and what I should be, all but less than he whom thunder hath made greater? Here at least we shall be free. The Almighty hath not built here for his envy, will not drive us hence. Here we may reign secure, and in my choice to reign is worth ambition, though in hell. Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. That last line, that better to reign in hell than serve in heaven, is one of the most famous lines in the entire poem. Satan is saying that we can make this place what we want it to be, and God's not likely to try to take it away from us, because who would want it anyway? So when he addresses his fallen angels, Satan blames God for their situation. But he who reigns monarch in heaven, till then as one secure sat on his throne, upheld by old repute, consent, or custom in his regal state, put forth at will, but still his strength concealed, which tempted our attempt, and wrought our fall. In other words, if God had shown them how powerful he really was, they never would have risen up against him. Does this seem like a fair statement to you? So Satan and his followers build their own palace in hell. It's called pandemonium. I'm sure that you've heard that word before, used to mean chaos. Well, you should know that Milton actually made up that word himself. He thought about the great temple in Greece, the Pantheon, whose name means all gods. He decided that hell's capital should be pandemonium. Let's back up here. Um, Pan meaning all, demon, of course, demons, and ium is uh, the ending there. So pandemonium is the name of the capital of hell. So as we leave Book 1, the demons are just about to have a great debate to argue for their best course of action. So we will move on then to Book 2. Thank you.